Welcome to Pivot Points, a new series featuring some of the world's most successful women, candidly sharing their stories and insights about how they made it to the top and how you can too. Hosted by Perry Yeatman, a straight-talking global executive and award-winning author who created the career and life of her dreams and now wants to help other ambitious women do the same.
Welcome. This is Perry Yeatman, host of Pivot Points. My next guest is another one of my favorite people. She's the founder and CEO of Gagen MacDonald, which is a leading strategy execution and change leadership firm. She's also CEO of Son & Sons, which is a pioneering branding and identity firm. And if that wasn't enough, in 2011, she launched Let Go and Lead, which is an online community dedicated to new philosophies and strategies for leadership. So she's a very successful entrepreneur. But even before striking out on her own, she was successful. She served as the VP of Corporate Communications and was a member of the Executive Management Committee for Navistar. There, she worked closely with the then CEO, John Horn, to direct the company's turnaround, helping take Navistar from the brink of bankruptcy to being named one of Wall Street Journal's top 10 performers. Prior to Navistar, she held leadership positions with Pittman Moore, Bayer, and BP. So she's had a broad range of corporate experience, and this has allowed her to claim, I love this, the white space between the silos as her ultimate functional expertise. She's impressive on any level, and I'm just glad to be able to call her my friend. I'm talking about Maril MacDonald. Welcome, Maril.
Thanks, Perry. I'm so glad to be with you today.
It's going to be awesome. So I know where you are, but how did you get there, right? Every journey has to begin somewhere. How did you find and land that first job or the first opportunity that you think really launched your career?
Well, my first job, it was interesting because I was a communication major at Purdue University, and I had many friends who were in engineering, as you can imagine, given that school, and many recruiters coming to talk to people and interview them. And lo and behold, there were no recruiters coming to interview for communications. So I started interviewing for sales jobs and actually was fortunate to get several different sales offers. And then sort of in the 11th hour, an opportunity came up to interview with the Standard Oil Company of Ohio, which later became British Petroleum, for a communication job. And I decided to take the PR job because I only had one offer in PR and I had 5 offers in sales. So I figured if I screw it up, I can always get a job in sales.
Okay, I love the logic. Okay, I love it.
Yeah, and then I think, what I think really launched me in many ways and what I really tap back into is that I had a lot of phenomenal opportunities at BP, and one of the things that happened is I was actually put through a program called the Formal Assessment of Corporate Talent. It was like a whole assessment for the people regarding future potential for executive positions, and it was pen and paper tests and team simulations and psychological tests and all these different things. And after I'd gone through that program, the VP of our department told me, you need to really think about what you want to do because we've decided you're too good to be in public relations. And I almost fell over. And of course, and as another outspoken woman, you'll appreciate this, I kind of looked at him and said, how does that make you feel? But actually then several opportunities came my way, and I chose the opportunity to go into oil spill crisis planning and preparedness. So you think about this, at this point I was in my early 20s, and I was managing oil spill response for British Petroleum. So thank God it was 20 years ago and not, just recently.
Seriously, yeah.
But that was fantastic because it gave me an opportunity really to recognize that competencies do transfer. And you can try all kinds of things. Just because I was trained in one field didn't necessarily mean I couldn't do other things as well.
What is it you think that made BP choose you? Like when you were sitting there, at Purdue and, did you get to interview on campus or how did you actually come to their attention? Because, I know that there probably weren't, as you said, a lot of interviews on campus for communication, but what is it you think about you that really made you stand out? Because a lot of our listeners are in this place right now trying to figure out how do they land that first job?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, the then president of Standard Oil and the vice president of communications came and spoke. Actually, it was really the president of the company was the speaker. And he came to a management class that I attended. And I think somewhere along the line, they just kind of got it almost as a whim. Oh, maybe we ought to hire someone for communications since the head of communications was there. They asked the school for references, and the school gave them 3 candidates. And the next morning, they interviewed the 3 of us. And I think what really helped me was that I was putting myself through school by teaching a biology class and tutoring football players in math and science. And I think that really appealed to the company because I had a science orientation. And, of course, being an oil company, it was a very science-driven business.
And that's something I never knew about you. Yeah, it also shows initiative, it shows responsibility, it shows you can juggle and manage many tasks. So I can totally see why that would actually be something that would be very appealing to them. So you're launched, you've done well, you get through kind of your next corporate role or your next couple. At some point along this line, you decide to get married, and I know you have children, not to mention dogs. And so how was it? How did you make that work? What compromises or trade-offs did you have to go through? Did you ever feel like throwing in the towel? How did you do it?
Well, first of all, and this is something I think is so important, and I talk to young women about this all the time. I think the most important decision you ever make is who you marry. And that was a very critical choice for me to, marry somebody that shared my values, that supported me as a strong woman who, and not always the easiest person to live with. I have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of things I want to do. I'm also a very emotional person, so I have that whole complicated thing of coming on really strong and also being very sensitive. And he has just been such a phenomenal supporter for me and willing to trade off as we've had different opportunities throughout our career. And we've each had different times where one stepped forward and the other supported. I think that was a huge thing. The other thing that was very huge was deciding that as we had children, our life was going to be our career and our kids. Mm-hmm. So we gave up a lot of things. We gave up going to museums. We gave up going to plays. We got really out of it from a pop culture standpoint. But we, devoted ourselves to our careers as we needed to, and then every free moment spent it with our kids. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was huge. I think throwing in the towel, let's face it, there are a lot of, late nights. So you're wondering, how am I going to get through this? I had a very colicky baby that I walked the house with, every night. And I watched all the lights in our neighborhood go off, and then I'd see all the lights in the neighborhood come on in the morning. And, I think what always helped, though, was remembering that there were so many people who'd been through that before me, and I'm one of 7 kids, so I kept thinking, wow, my mom did this 7 times. I can certainly do this.
Wow.
But yes. The big thing is asking for help. I am really good at accepting help, asking for and accepting help. I think that's probably my greatest strength that's gotten me through my entire career.
God, I love that insight because it's actually one of the things that we basically are awful at. Most women see it as like a sense of pride, or there's something that holds us back. One, we don't want to admit that we can't do it all. It seems like, other people are doing it all. Of course, you and I both know nobody's actually doing it all, right? It's like, this is a complete facade that everybody has it all under control and it's all perfectly managed, because that's just not the real world. But I think that is actually, I've never heard anybody say it that way, but that is so important, that you do have to decide what you want to do and what you're going to prioritize. And then you got to figure out, for all that other stuff that has to get done, how do you get the right help around you and then not feel guilty about it? Just say, this is it. I'm not doing that. Somebody else is going to do it, and it's all going to be fine. Right.
And not letting other people's judgments affect your judgment of yourself. I think that's the other really important thing. Mm-hmm. Another one is that as we go through these difficult times and we juggle, there amazingly great things come out of it too. So one thing I learned very early on was to be very clear with my children what I was going through and sharing with them the struggles and choices that I was trying to make, and I was always very clear that whenever you need me, I will be there. I might not always be able to be there when you want me, but I can be there when you need me. So I need you to learn the difference. And we actually have this now as one of our principles for our company. We can probably give everyone everything they need, but not everything they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it really helped raise very reasonable children. And, I can remember crazy stories where I was sweating over the fact that, should I be here, should I be there? I missed a board meeting one time because I was adamant that I needed to be at my daughter's first day of kindergarten. I couldn't miss this, and drove her up to the parking lot, and this was my second child. She saw her kindergarten teacher, who had been her older sister's teacher. She bolted out of the car, barely looked at me, and screamed, "Bye, Mom," and ran across the parking lot. And I'm sitting there going, I just, stood the line and missed a board meeting because I thought I was so darn important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she was like, she had her own life.
Right.
She didn't need me to be perfect.
Well, at least you got to kindergarten. I'll tell you, it was a similar story, right? I was juggling right after Kirsten was born, and my husband, who you know is Danish, is adamant about kids going to childcare, right? Not having a nanny at home, whatever, but a few hours of socialization every day, particularly since we thought the older one was already gone, so we thought this would be the only one at home, right? And so she was 6 months old, and he insisted that I had to take her to daycare. And I had done all the research. I visited everywhere, whatever. So I picked this daycare, and I'm, struggling to get her there. And I go to drop her off, right? And she, she's 6 months. She's sitting in the little basket. She's happy as a clam. All is good. I drop her off. I get to the front steps. I start sobbing, right? I'm melted on the stairs. Oh my God, this is, and the director comes out and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, I just had to drop her." She goes, "She's fine." She said, "I never have to worry about the kids. It's always the moms that suffer," right? And I just thought, this is crazy because there is no reason to feel guilty. She actually thrived in those hours that she had with the other kids, right? And she got every disease you wanted her to have. So her immune system is absolutely strong as heck. So it's all good. But but exactly. We all do that. So let me move forward a little bit. So one of the things that a lot of listeners are facing are transitions, right? And whether they are transitions that you choose or whether they're transitions that happen to you, even really confident, capable women can get nervous or really unsettled when they have to make a big transition. I know you went from corporate to starting your own thing, et cetera. So have you ever had a transition that made you feel like that? And how did you actually get past it? What would you tell somebody else who's actually maybe creating a second act or looking at a major career transition?
It's really interesting because I don't recall ever being really unsettled or shaken by a transition I drove myself. And even starting the company, it was interesting. My husband and I started our companies at the same time, so we both left corporate America at the same time, which is kind of crazy when you really think about it. But it really felt right. It just felt right. And we were really clear in what we needed for ourselves and for our family and what we wanted to do. I think the most unsettling thing is listening to everybody else who has a point of view on why wouldn't you stay in that fabulous job? And every time I've taken a new role, I was leaving something that to everyone else looked like the cat's bird seat. Mm-hmm. And it was. I was very blessed. I had a lot of wonderful opportunities. But I think running to something instead of running from something is really important. And you can't run to it if you're not clear on what you want. Mm-hmm. And that can be, what's unsettling about that is everyone else has an opinion of what you should want and what they want for you. Mm-hmm. And for anybody who has, any modicum of skills or talents, there are a lot of things you could do that you probably shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. Because you'd be very strong at it, but it wouldn't make your heart sing. And so I think the times that have been most unsettling for me have been when a transition has come that I might have worried, am I up for this? So, just as an example, I started the firm in 1998, And we went through, one of our biggest client was United Airlines during September 11th. And we had a huge team on the ground. We, of course, were now supporting a client who had lost 2 planes. They'd lost a lot of their crew. They'd lost their customers. Then they lost their business, right? Because all of a sudden no one was flying. There were all these different issues. They had to lay off 20,000 people, which meant we suddenly had a lot of financial concerns at our firm. And, really the most unsettling things are when you realize, wow, I am responsible for, at that point was probably 40 families. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know whether we'll get through this or not. Those have been unsettling times. But what I found that really helped was to voice that, and to say it out loud. This is where we are. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's what, we can do. And here's how we'll get through it together. And, again, kind of relying on everyone else, around me, too, to be part of the solution. I think that's been really helpful.
Yes, and I think that, it's funny, even listening to you, I can see why your firm is so successful in terms of leadership and strategy execution, because it's, right, you're actually, it's like living change management in your own world, right? So it's exactly, you're doing and living the practice that you're also helping other companies with. So,
well, you mentioned Let Go and Lead, and it's an online community where I've interviewed some of the most phenomenal thought leaders out there. And a woman I interviewed, her name is Margaret Wheatley, and she's written a number of books. She's quite a strong leader in the concept of how to develop communities, but she also talks a lot about just what is the role of a leader in a major organization. And she said something that's really stuck with me, and she talks about the importance of a leader as a host, not a hero, and the difference of the role when one shows up as a host. And I've always, this was probably just maybe 3 or 4 years ago I learned that phrase from Meg, but I found it to be such a great way of describing, what I've tried to do all these years, and I think not only the power it gives to other people, but the actual strength and groundedness it gives to yourself. Because if you think you're the hero, you're always feeling like you're not enough.
Wow. That's fascinating. It's not just business. Think about it as you're the host of your life, right? Right. That's very empowering. Very cool.
You're the host of your family. You can't be the hero.
It also gets very crowded, right? Because then what room do you leave for other people to be the hero if you're always the hero, right? It doesn't really actually enable other people to step up and, wow, very good. I love that. That's a great insight.
I must admit, though, I do have a plaque that says, I'm not saying I'm Wonder Woman, but no one's ever seen Wonder Woman and me in the room at the same time.
Of course you do.
I couldn't help it. I saw it. I laughed. I just thought it was so funny.
It's perfect. It's perfect. And I hope you got it actually with a picture and everything.
No, it's just one of those goofy little wooden plaques you buy in a jewelry store.
Well, I'm just going to tell you, I'm photoshopping your head now onto the Wonder Woman outfit, because really that is.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, good. Give me that figure.
You and me both, babe. You and me both.
That's one way of getting it, yeah.
That's the only way I'm getting it. But okay. So speaking of Wonder Woman, every Wonder Woman I know, actually, they had to overcome some bad breaks or big failures. I mean, you just talked about, the challenge with United and it being your biggest customer, or been on the receiving end, frankly, of some really unacceptable behavior. So since it didn't derail your rise to the top, would you be willing to share with listeners one of the most difficult or outrageous things that happened to you, and how did you handle it?
Well, one of the most difficult things that happened to me was of my own making, and you had mentioned Navistar and all the phenomenal work we did there, and I've been very generously given a lot of credit for it, but I screwed up a few things too. And we were going through some very, very difficult times as a company and working with our unions, and the biggest union was the United Auto Workers. They were very powerful in the company. They had a representative on our board of directors. We were trying to change fundamentally the business model of the company, and there was a long history of distrust from the standpoint of management and union. And I had worked very, very hard to gain the trust of a lot of union leadership. And we were in the middle of negotiations and putting out, and this is what's interesting, I remember so much the trauma of it, and I don't even exactly remember the facts, which is another life lesson to everybody. We were putting out an announcement, and we got something wrong in that announcement that totally surprised the union and surprised my CEO. And I went up to see him, and he said to me, he looked at me and he said, "This could get me fired." And I said, "No, John, it won't get you fired because I'm resigning. This is on my watch. I did this." And what happened, really, Perry, we were moving so fast and I missed it. I mean, it wasn't like something I didn't know. I missed it.
Yeah, it happens.
And he said, "No, I'd never allow you to resign." And I said, "Well, you really can't stop me." And I called the union leader who was on the board and said to him, "Here's what happened. And it's really important to me you understand this was not the integrity of John Horn, who was our CEO. This was on me. I blew it, and I screwed it up, and I resigned. And John doesn't want to accept the resignation, but this is on my watch." And he said, "I'll stand behind John. I wouldn't accept your resignation either."
Wow.
He said, "Everybody makes a mistake. I'm really ticked."
Yep.
"But you've been working to improve the relations with us and the company, and I trust you, and I'm not going to let you hang for this." I was shocked.
That is rare, actually. I wish it was more common, but it's rare. But it shows the depth of the work that you had done, the integrity with which you had pursued it, and the fact that they absolutely believe that's exactly what had happened. And indeed, everybody is human. It happens. But wow.
Yeah, and what I think it did was the whole issue was around intent, because actually what we said in the release wasn't really all that damaging. It just was the intent of, were we trying to back them in a corner, right? And that's, one of the things that I've really learned in life too, is that so often people are more concerned about the intent than actually what's happening. And so really ensuring people understand what your intent is behind something is critical. And it kind of goes back, like even what I was saying about my kids, when they knew my intent is, if you really want me there, I'll always be there. It's amazing how many times they've said, "No, it's really okay."
And I also think that, particularly for strong women like you or I, people with outspoken personalities, whatever, I know for a fact that the only reason I survived particularly on the corporate side, even more than the consulting side, was because people understood. I was so direct and so clear and so unequivocal in how I was going about things. Like if I believed that was the best answer for Unilever or Kraft or whatever, then that is what I said. And whether it was something that the CEO agreed with or disagreed with or whatever, people knew that when I gave my opinion, it was truly my best opinion at the time based on the information I had, right? It wasn't a political thing. It wasn't my agenda. It was what I thought was the best thing for the company. And that was speaks to intent, right? It wasn't about me. It was about trying to do the right thing for the individual or the company or the whatever. And that got me over a lot of what otherwise would have been, kind of sharp elbow type moments, because, I wasn't exactly a wallflower, right? And I always came from the outside. So I always had different opinions or different experiences or whatever. And so I think you're right. I think that if that is the type of leader you are, particularly as a woman, I think being clear about intent, whether it's overt or whether it's just well known and without you having to actually say it. I actually usually had to put it out there verbally, but nonetheless, either way, eventually then people, then they can trust you because they know you're a straight shooter. What you say is what you get. Let me ask you, now we're going to move into the fun, what I think of as the fun round, right? So it's just some questions. They're not directly tied to career advice, but I think they're insightful and they're kind of fun. What would be the one word you would use to describe your professional path so far?
Gratitude.
Oh, okay. And why is that?
Because I really, first of all, I believe that gratitude is a choice and a way of life that's very important. And so I always want to live in gratitude, but also I have a lot to be grateful for. You know, I was fortunate enough to have a good education. I had many good career opportunities, worked with many phenomenal people. I now run a company where we basically get paid every day to go and learn from some of the best business people in the world, seeing how different companies and industries are run. We're in the middle of an incredible time right now where the whole world is really rethinking the whole concept of work. And, of course, we're a firm that really focuses on that whole aspect of work and the human struggle of executing a company strategy. So it's just an amazing time.
Well, I think it's a great word, and I think you're right. I also feel very grateful, and I think most of the women that I have interviewed feel very grateful. So that makes sense. Who has inspired you, or who does inspire you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and you know, so many people and have inspired me and do inspire me for so many different ways. And one that always comes right to the top of my mind is Marjorie Krause, the CEO of APCO. I think she's one of the most phenomenal women I've ever met in my life. She's not only just an incredible business person, she's a global thought leader. She's a grandmother of 10 beautiful grandchildren. She, you know, she's a loving, caring friend. Just everything about her I find so amazing.
I have to, actually, I saw her last night in her office, and I agree with you. In fact, I'm definitely going to have her on the program, but she is wonderful. And she is one of those women who had it all, right? In terms of she made it all work, and she found ways to give back, and she still finds ways to give back, and she's successful, and she's a great mom. And yeah.
You know what else really inspires me are so many people who are struggling with difficulties in their personal life. Like I think in particular, if we have a couple of people in our firm who have family members that are very, very ill, and how they show up, you know, and do their job and show up for their family and keep their equilibrium. And, you know, there are so many people that we aren't even aware of what's going on in their lives that show up in a great way every day. And that's very inspiring to me.
I agree. I recently found out somebody that I had worked with for several years actually suffered from mental illness. And you know the, of course, stereotype of mental illness, right? You can never talk about that at work, right? It's just not discussed. And I just thought, wow, so amazing to me that this person who was an absolute world-class professional that I worked closely with for years, and I never had a clue what she was going through every day, right? Every day she was struggling. And I thought, wow, you know, and again, that's something I really hope we can change in America, so that this is something we can be more outwardly supportive of for people. But I agree with you. It is amazing. So on, you know, inspiration, superpowers. Okay. So if you could pick 3 women, and they can be alive or dead, who you would want to have lunch with, who would you pick and why?
I would pick Lisa Randall. Lisa was and is really one of the first women who was tenured in the physics departments at Harvard, MIT, and Princeton. And she's doing all this unbelievable research in particle physics and cosmology. And it's like really mind-blowing stuff.
If you'd given me 10,000 choices, this would not have been one of the names I would have come up with. Go ahead. I like this. I love this.
Like, it's just amazing what she's doing. I don't even understand it. So it'd either be a short lunch or a long lunch. She could explain it all to me. But she is actually, she's doing a lot of work with NASA and all these different areas, and she writes about the thought that it's very possible that we're living in a sinkhole in a higher dimensional universe. And I just think, wow.
Oh, wow is right, yeah.
Think about where that might take us. So I thought that would be really interesting. You know, I'd love to have lunch with her.
Absolutely.
The other one I think would be really cool is J.K. Rowling. You know, you just think about how she just sort of willed herself into getting that first book written, and really against all kinds of odds, and how amazing it was, and just one's imagination, how that could come out of a person's brain. I just think it's so incredible. And then what she's done with her wealth and her charities and all that, I think is fabulous.
Yeah, I agree. It is one of those things. I mean, everybody has a gift, right? And my gift, maybe it just died early on. I don't know, but I can't imagine. I don't have the brain that would be able to fabricate that kind of world and in that kind of detail. Like, it's just not a gift I was given. So I agree with you. I think she is amazing. And my daughter has loved all of those books and the movies.
Yeah.
We own them all.
Yeah, and then sort of going in a different direction, I'd say Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Mm-hmm. So, the U.S. Supreme Court Justice, I think you just think about the decisions that come before her and the choices that have to be made. And I was so impressed with, she had established what now they call the Ginsburg precedent, where when she was in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee and pressed on her personal views on a variety of issues that were likely to come before her in the court, she refused to comment on them because she really believes that a justice has to stay really open-minded and be open to hearing the evidence as it relates to the Constitution, that it's not about your own personal beliefs. And I just think it would be, you talk about somebody who stood up for what she really believes. I think that would be amazing to hear her stories. There's probably a lot of stories she couldn't tell us, but it'd be really fascinating.
Agreed. Awesome. So we're coming towards the end of our time together on this interview, and so is there a question that I haven't asked you that you'd really want me to ask you?
No, I can't really think of a question. I guess if I just, so one thing I was thinking about in preparing for this was just thinking about some of the principles that I really believe in and that have been helpful to me. And again, these are now principles by which we run our firm because, of course, the firm is sort of the shadow of the leader. But a couple things I've really learned in life is to be where you need to be, and only you know where that is. We get so confused by, worrying about what everybody else thinks we need to be. But deep down, at any moment, we know where we need to be. And then I believe when in doubt, do the loving thing.
Oh, that's a great one.
And remember that envy is a lack of imagination.
I love that one.
And then just the last thing I'll offer, to women starting out is we have here in Illinois, our lottery, their logo for the little lotto is you can't win if you don't play.
Yep. So get out there, raise your hands, take a risk.
Yep. Life is like gym class. You get a B+ if you show up. You get an F if you don't.
It's funny that you say that because I never thought about gym class, but it is one of those
I
things.
date myself calling it gym class.
Well, actually, no. My daughter still. What do they call it? I don't know what they call it, but she still has something that
PE.
PE. Thank you very much, PE. So clearly, this is not where I spend a lot of my. You are where you need to be. PE is not the thing I'm worried about for her. So she's good in the PE front. But it's interesting that people often asked me, how did I get ahead or whatever, and I said, I always remember the quote about 90% is just showing up, right? So
right.
It was the fact that I was the one who always raised their hand, the fact that I was in early and worked late, or I was just there, right? And so part of it was just being there, being willing, being interested and curious and wanting to be included or helpful made a lot of difference. So I agree with you. Would that be your last word, or would you want to offer any other advice to other women? You have created the life of your dreams, right? And you've built that with a career, a very successful career. Is there anything else you'd want to say to other women who are trying to do the same thing?
Well, I guess, and I've mentioned this before, I think it's really important to get clear what you want. And it doesn't have to be what you want for the rest of your life, but be clear what you want now. Most people, I believe, they don't get what they want because they don't know what they want. So really spend the time with yourself to be true to that and have the courage to want it, even if you don't know how to get it.
So I want to ask you a question about this because I happen to agree with you that it's the single most important thing. And, there's a great Chinese proverb that, if you don't know where you want to go, any road will take you there. So it's how is there any specific tip, technique, book, anything? How do you figure out what your priorities are and cut out all the noise that you've alluded to where everybody else is telling you what you should be doing? Is there anything you could share that is like how you do it? How do you get that clarity?
Sometimes I think it comes to you over time, but I recently went to Maril, this spa, and they focus on wellness and health, and there's a woman named Tej Paul, and she is a coach, and her coaching is around energy, actually, and tapping into your soul purpose. And she had us do an exercise, and she actually wrote a book called, I think it's called Manifesting Moment to Moment. But she had us do an exercise where she had us sit and just write down 20 things that bring you joy. And then for the next 45 days, you're supposed to every day just write down whatever. And it could be anything. It could be smelling, the flowers, or it could be going to a great concert, like big or small, just little things. And it was really an interesting process to start seeing the patterns that kept coming up. And I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah.
So that's like a quick thing that people can do. And I think if you really watch what choices you tend to make, you see pretty quickly what you value too. Someone once told me you can tell what someone values by where they spend their money and where they spend their time and with whom they spend their time. And I've thought a lot about that. I think that's really true. And you can turn that on yourself.
Actually, I think that is profound. And it's something you just said that. And I thought, it actually sums up every one of the choices that I made in terms of major career decisions. So you just made me realize that's exactly right, because I was going after what I wanted by the choices that I was making, even if I was not even conscious at the time that that's the choice I was making. And it took me till much later, as you're well aware of, when I chose to step down from craft, and it was a personal choice about spending more time specifically with my husband and my then 7-year-old.
Right, and, I remember that. Yeah.
And it turned out to be right, because I get joy every day out of doing that.
And some of the best experiences are the ones that help you learn what you don't want.
Awesome.
Because it's fine. Sometimes we think we want something, and then when you get it, you're like, oops, this wasn't it. But that's okay. That's part of the whole journey.
Yep. You're absolutely right. I tell people the only thing not to do is be dead in the water, right? Like, just don't stand still, because even if you take a risk and you hate it, as you say, you will have learned so much about what you do want and what you don't want by doing that it's still worth it, right? It's just keep going forward and keep trying things, because every one of those is going to give you feedback that if you process it, you'll be able to figure out. So this is something I really like. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not good at. And you'll calibrate all the way through.
And the last thought I'd like to leave is, don't ever believe that women don't help women. That makes me crazy when I hear that. I have been helped by so many phenomenal women, like this opportunity you're giving me today. There are so many wonderful people out there helping one another.
I agree. Oh, well, and I owe you, because you have been a tremendous help to me. I will never forget our dinners. And I agree with you. I do think I have been lucky. I have worked for many female CEOs, as it turns out, and they've actually been really good to me. I've learned a lot from them. They've given me great opportunities, but also just the camaraderie that I found with other women at Kraft and at Unilever. It's been really powerful, and I couldn't have done it without it. I would never have made it if I didn't have a safe place where I could have gone and talked about some of these really tough issues, because I felt like I was the only one who didn't have it all together and knew exactly what they were doing. And it turns out I wasn't. We were all in the same boat.
We're all a work in progress.
Absolutely. So, Maril, thank you so much for your time. I know listeners got
Perry.
a lot out of this, and I hope to see you soon.
You've been listening to Pivot Points. a series designed to help ambitious women have the careers and lives of their dreams. To hear more interviews, go to www.yourcareeryourterms.com. And be sure to tell us what you think. If there are topics you'd like covered or